Hello YouTube, Bruno Luce here with GLB Productions. Thanks for joining us for this video. Now, in April of 2015, I posted a video entitled How to Connect a Power Amplifier to Passive Loudspeakers. And since then, I've had a whole bunch of questions from you, my viewers, usually along these lines. The first type of question is, I have these speakers, what type of power amplifier do I need? The other type of question is, I have this power amplifier, what kind of speakers do I need? And so in this video, I'm going to address both of these questions under the general heading of how do we match speakers and power amplifiers in a sound reinforcement context. Let's begin. Okay, so let's begin with the first question. I have these speakers, what power amplifier should I buy? Now, for my first example, we're going to use the same speakers that we used in the earlier video, and those would be the Eckler Verso 12s. You'll probably remember this specification sheet from that particular video. So I've broken down this problem into 3 steps. The first step is you need to determine the recommended amplifier power for your existing loudspeakers. Determine the recommended amplifier power for your existing speakers. In order to work this out, the first place that you should look is in the loudspeaker owner's manual or the data sheet. In front of us, we have the data sheet for the Verso 12, and as you can see, it gives a whole bunch of information here. This particular data sheet is shared between 3 models, the 8, 10, and 12, and you can see that on this side here, although it does have something called power rating, it doesn't actually provide us with a recommended amplifier power. However, if we look in the preceding pages of the owner's manual, we actually see that there is a section entitled Recommended Amplifier, and it tells us that for the Verso 12, you should use an amplifier between 350 and 700 watts. So far so good. Now, the second step is to determine the impedance of the speaker in ohms. Determine the impedance of the speaker in ohms. The majority of sound reinforcement loudspeakers are 8 ohms, but you don't want to guess, you want to make sure you know this for sure. So if we go back to the specification sheet, you can see here that under Verso 12, it tells us that the impedance is in fact 8 ohms. In fact, the 8, 10, and 12 are all 8 ohms. So we know that we want a power amplifier of between 350 and 700 watts, and we know that the enclosure is 8 ohms impedance. The third step is to look for a power amplifier that has that power rating into 8 ohms. Now this is really important, okay? Most modern power amplifiers have 2 channels which are independent of one another, and you need to look for the rating per channel into 8 ohms. Alright, so let's say that you have these loudspeakers from Eckler and you decide to go with Eckler power amplifiers simply because they're both from the same company. Maybe you can get a discount or something along those lines. So the next thing you should do is you should have a look at the power amplifiers from that company and make a choice based on what you have worked out. So as you can see here, Eckler happened to produce 3 power amplifiers, the 500, the 1000, and the 1600. Now, again, bear in mind, we're looking for a power amplifier that delivers between 350 and 700 watts per channel into 8 ohms. Let's see, I want 8 ohm stereo, okay? And what that means is 8 ohm stereo is a way of saying power per channel into 8 ohms, right? You don't want 4 ohms and you don't want 8 ohms bridged. Bridged is power from the amplifier in bridge mono. So as you can see here, the XLA 600 produces 450 watts into 8 ohms per channel. This amplifier would be the best match because we're looking for something between 350 and 700 watts. You can see the 1000 is too small, it's 330, and the 500 is smaller still at 210. Could I use a smaller amplifier and bridge it into that particular enclosure? And the answer is yes. You could conceivably use the XLA 500 and run it bridge mono into a single one of the enclosures. It delivers 640 watts, which is within our recommendation of 350 to 700. The problem with this is that you would need to buy one power amplifier per loudspeaker, and this is not very efficient, and it involves transporting more amplifiers and special types of cabling. So I normally recommend that you try and get a larger power amplifier and run more speakers off of it, rather than choosing a smaller one and then having to buy more power amplifiers as a result. Now, let's say you didn't want to buy ECLA power amplifiers, right? Let's say that you choose to go with another company, and that company is Crown, okay? So you ask your Crown sales rep, hey, you know, what kind of amps can I use? And he recommends you this, which is the Drive Core series, a very popular series of amps for portable PA. So, same thing. You want power per channel into 8 ohms, all right? Now, Crown calls it 8 ohm dual. You can see they have 4 ohm dual, 4 ohm bridged, etc. And you run your eye down this and you say, okay, I want 350 to 700 watts. And you can see these two, the two larger models, would both be suitable, all right? The XLS 2000 delivers 375 watts, which is above 300, and the 2500 delivers 440. Now, between these two models, you could choose either one. If your budget covers it, I would choose the larger of the two, simply because it gives you more power reserve. And with power amplifiers, you always want more power as long as you are within the recommended amplifier specifications for your loudspeaker. Now let's use another set of loudspeakers as an example. Let's say that you have a pair of Mackie C300Zs, all right? These are the passive version of the SRM 450. They're very popular, they're very widely used. So you have this pair of C300s and you need to choose a power amplifier. Again, the first step is to determine the recommended amplifier power for that model loudspeaker. You look at the C300Z specification sheet, and once again, although it does have something that's entitled power handling, RMS, music, peak, and so on, there doesn't appear to be a recommended power amplifier. So having watched this video, you know, let's go and do a little bit of digging. So you go into the loudspeaker manual and you find on page 7, there is actually a section entitled Amplifier Power, and within that section you find this that says we recommend that you use an amplifier that is rated at twice the continuous power rating. This would be 300 watts, so 600 watts per channel into 8 ohms. So once again, you may need to do a little bit of digging to find this information, but it is almost always there. at least from reputable loudspeaker manufacturers. So we're now looking for a loudspeaker that delivers about 600 watts per channel into 8 ohms. We go back and we look at the spec sheet for our Crown series here. And oh dear, oh gosh, even the largest amplifier here only delivers 440 into 8 ohms. Dear me. Okay, maybe one of the Eckler's will do. So we go back and we look at the Eckler spec sheet here, and we see to our dismay that even the largest of the Eckler's, the 1600, tops out at 450 watts into 8 ohms. So what are we going to do? The good news is Mackie in this case are being quite conservative, all right? They're recommending the largest amplifier that could be safely used with these speakers. Let's go back to the specification sheet here. Now, if in doubt, and if the manufacturer does not provide a range of amplifier powers, what you do is you need to look for this, the RMS power handling, root mean square. If amplifier manufacturers give nothing else, they will almost always give an RMS rating, okay? If they don't give an RMS rating, so you see something like music power or peak power or PMPO, peak maximum power, peak music power, I would think twice about using those loudspeakers for sound reinforcement. So if you look, you'll see an RMS rating. You want a power amplifier that has an output power of between RMS and double the RMS. So in this case, you want an amplifier that delivers between 300 and 600 watts, okay? It doesn't have to be exactly 600. So you heave a big sigh of relief and you go back to your specification sheet for your Eckler's and you see, okay, I want between 300 and 600. Aha! In this case, the 1000 delivering 330 watts will be suitable, and the 1600 delivering 450 watts is also suitable. Let's look at our Crowns. Crown Drive Core series. In this case, the top 3 models would all be suitable. The 1500 doing 300, the 2000 delivering 375, and the 2500 delivering 440. Now, once again, if your budget allows, it's always better to have more power. So the 2500 would be the best choice. I would probably not choose the 1500 simply because it's right at the bare minimum. If you can avoid it, you don't want an amplifier that delivers below the RMS rating of your loudspeakers. So now let's move on to the second question that I get a lot. I have this amplifier, what loudspeakers should I buy? I think that after the previous 2 examples, you should have a fairly good idea of how you answer this question. Basically, step 1 is to determine the output of your amplifier per channel into 8 ohms, not the total wattage of the amp. Manufacturers like to use the total wattage of the amp in their amplifier serial numbers because it makes everything look more impressive, especially to men, because we like things that are bigger, okay? So don't be fooled, all right? Don't think that because my amplifier is the XLS 1000, I have a 1000 watt amplifier. Yes, you do, but not per channel into 8 ohms, okay, which is the figure that you're interested in. So let's say that we have a Crown XLS amplifier and we have the 2500, okay? So you want to work out what does this do per channel into 8 ohms, 440. So with this figure, what you want to do is you want to look for an 8 ohm loudspeaker that has a recommended amplifier power of about 440 watts, okay? Now, as we learned from the previous example, some manufacturers will give a range of numbers, okay? So, to use the Verso 12s, all right? The Verso 12s, 350 to 700 watts. So, this one, the 2500 would be suitable, right? Because 440 is between 350 and 700 watts. What about the C300? We know that the C300, we want an amplifier of between 300 and 600 watts. Would that work? Yep, it would. Okay, so again, determine output of your amplifier per channel into 8 ohms and then find a loudspeaker with a matching recommendation. Now, the final question that I get when it comes to matching power amplifiers and loudspeakers is, my amplifier is, quote, too small for my loudspeaker. Can I still use it? So the first thing is, what do we mean by too small? In general, by too small, we mean an amplifier whose output per channel is less than the RMS rating of the loudspeaker in question. So if we use the C300, we know from the previous discussion that we want an amplifier that delivers between 300 and 600 watts. So if the amplifier delivered less than 300 watts per channel into 8 ohms, that would be too small, all right? In other words, it would be underrated for that particular loudspeaker. Can you still use it? The answer is yes, you'll still get sound, okay? You could use a 1 watt amplifier to drive this loudspeaker and you would still get sound. Is it a good idea? Not really, because the tendency is with an underrated power amplifier, you tend to push the amplifier and you tend to enter a situation that is called clipping, okay? Clipping is where the clip light on the front of the amplifier comes on and usually the output sounds distorted. Visually, clipping looks like this. This is a normal sine wave. This is a clipped sine wave. Basically, the amplifier has reached the maximum output that it is capable of doing. If you continue to increase the input signal, the output level won't go any further, right? But it becomes characterized by this sort of flat top squared off waveform. And if you send this type of signal to the loudspeaker, you'll get distortion and you will get overheating in the driver, which will eventually result in driver failure. So if you use a power amplifier that is underrated, you need to be very, very certain that you do not clip the input to your power amplifier. In other words, the clip indicator on the front panel should never come on. Now, what about if you clip a properly rated power amplifier? If you clip a power amplifier that is rated properly, it will also damage the loudspeaker. However, the tendency for you to do so is less because the power amplifier is bigger, therefore it will give you more volume for a given input signal. Okay? All right, so I hope that this video has helped to clear up your doubts, whether you have an existing power amplifier and need new speakers, or an existing set of speakers and need a new power amplifier. It should also help you to match speakers and power amplifiers if you have varieties of them floating around and are not sure which ones work together the best. As always, if you have questions or comments, do leave them below. You can also get in touch with me via YouTube messaging or on my Facebook page, GLB Productions. So until the next video, this has been Bruno Luce with GLB Productions. Thanks for watching and God bless you. Goodbye.